All right, this video is for the men. So actually making your sons emotionally attuned will make them stronger. Emotions and being able to deal with them does not equal weakness. Let's dig in. Leslie Wells, Connection Coach here. I help individuals build, repair, thrive, heal in their marriages, and I do this by looking at things through an attachment lens. So here's what happens as far as attachment style. Attachment theory has been around forever. There is tons of empirical studies. It's been around since the 1950s, the 1960s. It was created by John Bowlby, and it gives us so much information because it is the biggest predictor of how people show up in relationships and why they do the things that they do in relationships. And so key attachment years are between the ages of usually 0 and 6, and they go on beyond that. But what we learn from our caregivers, the messages that we are given and that we receive and that are instilled in us, the blueprint for what we believe about people and relationships, then we carry those forward through the rest of our lives. And so right now, I feel like society a lot of times really tries to discourage men from dealing with emotions. We consider men who deal with those things weak, and if they don't show up in a certain way, then we deem them weak. And the truth is, being emotionally attuned is a crucial part of true masculinity and being a strong male figure, and especially important if you're going to ever be a leader. So when I'm talking about a lack of emotional attunement here, I'm specifically talking about the dismissive avoidant. And when I talk about that, these are kids that are grown up without any emotional attunement. Their parents typically correct them, punish them, dismiss them whenever they display feelings and emotions. The parent typically does not model feelings or emotions. They usually avoid those situations. And so this is the dad who, when their child is hurt on the ball field, says, "Oh, suck it up, you're fine, get up and keep going," rather than validate their experience of being hurt, empathize with them with being hurt, and then emotionally help them move through that so that they can then get up and move on. It's the parent who, whenever their child is upset and crying, then they basically say, "Well, I'll give you something to cry about," instead of actually sitting with them and their experience and allowing them to have that emotional experience. They create a ton of shame around having emotions. And so a lot of times I think dads will do this, especially if they're avoidant dads, because they think they're trying to toughen their sons up or they're trying to make them stronger for a cruel world. So maybe their intentions are honorable, or maybe it's just that they don't know how to deal with their own emotions, so they don't know how to show up when their children come to them with problems, struggling with emotions. A lot of times they're overwhelmed by the emotions of others, and so they don't know how to help their children through that. So if your son comes to you and they have a breakup and they're struggling and you blow them off, dismiss them, or even laugh at them and make them feel weak for having those emotions, you are then creating the perfect storm to create a dismissive, avoidantly attached adult later in life. And so what does this look like in adulthood? It looks like a person, a man who was once a boy that received no emotional attunement, then becomes a man who really struggles with some of the key components of what we would consider like masculinity or being a good, strong man. Instead of them being a strong man, a lot of time they really struggle with a lot of weakness. And here's why. It also looks like someone who grows up to be a man who has a really difficult time having hard conversations. And so, we would consider somebody pretty strong if they could have difficult conversations, navigate conflict, if they could come to a resolution with these things, if they were able to also deal with things with other people. So one of the problems with dismissive avoidance is they tend to deal with everything solo. As a child, they learned that nobody was present to help them process their emotions or deal with them. And so they learned to do those things off on their own. Well, think about somebody who maybe is in a leadership position at a company. It's really crucial for them as a leader to be able to delegate and rely on and lean on the resources of other people, right? But people who are dismissive avoidance typically are not able to lean on other people. They do everything on their own, and they really don't even deal with it. They suppress, they distract, they're not actually dealing with it. So instead of being able to tackle a problem head on and walk through it, they're walking around it and they're just completely avoiding it and brushing it under the rug, so nothing ever gets solved. So part of being a strong man, a strong leader for your family, is to be able to resolve problems, to be able to walk through them, to be able to confront hard things. The other problem with men who grow up this way that makes them maybe weaker instead of stronger is that they really are unable to deal with the expectations of others. So they don't grow up feeling stronger. They grow up with a feeling of I'm defective, I am broken. I had all these emotional needs. My caregivers were not able to give them to me. I'm defective because I have these emotional needs that no one around me is displaying, and they're telling me they're bad. So that makes me defective. And B, I can't get my emotional needs met. Therefore, I must be a failure and something's wrong with me. So instead of growing up feeling stronger, they actually grow up feeling weak. They grow up feeling inferior, inadequate. They have so many feelings around being a failure, never being able to get it right, never being able to show up for people well. So the inner self-worth that you create by trying to make your son stronger is actually one of extreme weakness. They really have very little self-worth and confidence. They also tend to flee from expectations and commitment. So our dismissive avoidants are the ones who do not like to actually get committed. They go into their trauma response and they start to withdraw and pull away whenever they have to deal with commitment in a relationship. They're way more comfortable in a situationship. So they're less likely to get married faster, to settle down, to actually take on responsibilities of a strong man. They also tend to flee from expectations, and they really feel like they're not capable of meeting people's expectations. That goes back to that self-worth. So they run from expectations, whether it's expectations for their children, their wives especially, and so that again is not creating strength. They lack the ability to empathize and validate the inner experience of other people. So strong people not only are able to hold space for their own feelings and emotions without, falling apart under the weight of those things, but they're also able to hold space and not be overwhelmed with the emotions of others. So a strong man, in my opinion, someone who is securely attached, we'll say that, whether or not you agree with the strong part, someone who is securely attached, when their wife brings them a problem and she's wrought up and she's distraught and she's upset, that kind of man can sit there and hold space for her feelings without matching her reactivity or matching her level of emotion. He can stay calm, engaged, and present. He can make her feel like he's a rock, he is a safe place, he can be depended on and counted on. So men who are dismissive avoidants really struggle to do this. They tend to not be able to deal with it. Oh my gosh, this is too much for me. This is overwhelming. You have all these big feelings. I can't deal with this. I gotta go. And they distract. So these are men that instead of showing up with responsibility and accepting more responsibility and stepping into that role with responsibility and expectations, these are the men that are throwing themselves into work, ignoring their family, neglecting their spouse. These are the men that are spending way too much time in their hobbies as a distraction, or worse. I see a lot of these men that end up in situations where there's pornography and other things, that substance abuse, things that they will distract from instead of dealing with the hard things. So it's definitely something that is not stronger. They also have a lot of chronic health issues and chronic illnesses, because we know that if you suppress scientifically, your nervous system stays dysregulated. And so those emotions are eventually going to come out somewhere. Emotions, feelings are energy. They have to move through the body. If they are not allowed to move through the body, then we see long-term health effects, cardiovascular events, autoimmune-like symptoms, muscle pains, headaches, GI issues, but they will actually end up making people physically weaker over time because they are suppressing. They also really have this tendency to self-sabotage because they believe that they're not good enough, and so they believe they're not worthy of a relationship or worthy of a good partner, and so they sort of subconsciously will mess up their relationship because they already feel like they're going to disappoint the person, they're going to get left, they're going to mess it up anyway, so they will actually self-sabotage. And these are not things that we think about in somebody that we consider strong. So by actually showing your child emotional attunement, by dealing with their emotions, teaching them how to recognize, identify, process them, let them move through the body, facing things head on, rather than dismissing them or suppressing them, you're actually raising your son to be more capable, more equipped, to be stronger, to be able to take on more responsibilities, to handle more expectations, more commitment, to be able to actually show up better for others that are important to them, to be able to validate and empathize with their wife and their children and give them a safe, secure place and someone that they can depend on. All of those things make them stronger. So stop thinking that by dealing with your child's emotions that you're going to make them weak. The complete opposite is true and has been proven over and over again. If you want to raise a securely attached young man, then you need to start by being emotionally attuned to them when they are a child.